Welcome to Small Town Sound, the podcast where we highlight incredible music programs doing big things in small schools and rural communities. I'm your host, Steve Brown. Today's guest is Nick Williams, Director of Bands at Murphysboro High School in Southern Illinois. Nick has built a program that reflects the heart of its community, hardworking students, strong traditions, and a commitment to musical excellence. Nick, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Steve. I'm glad we're doing this, buddy.
Absolutely, I love this. So tell
This
me,
is
tell me first a little bit about your program for those people who aren't familiar with Murphysboro.
yeah. So we are actually in year 36 of the CE band portion of the program for Murphysboro High School. So before that, we had Buddy Rogers here for over 30 years, and Buddy did a fantastic job. And then in 1990, they brought in Mark Mickelay from the Metro East area. And so what Mickelay did is he basically transformed the concert band program, kept it going, but then created a marching band program that has been nationally known since the 1990s. So basically, Mark did a summer tour system. He used to be with the Belleville Black Knights, brought in a staff from many of the Belleville Black Knight alums, and we just created a marching band program to complement the concert band and then jazz band programs and pep band programs. And so, I'm the fourth director in the last 36 years, if that tells you anything in terms of how this kind of job goes. I mean, Mark held it for 11 years, and then Justin Clare held it for 5. Michael Moreland, my colleague, he's now back at the middle school. He held it for 14 years, and then I've had it the last 6. So it's been a privilege to be at the helm, but you kind of look at it as it's your time, and then eventually your time will be up, and then you kind of pass it on to the next director, hoping they continue on the tradition.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about the demographics of your school. How big is it? How big is your town? How big is your program?
Yeah.
Things like that.
So our school at Murphysboro High School is about 585 students. The town is about, I would say, a little over 8,000. We have a very supportive community. That tradition of the band program the last 36 years is very well known. And so basically when the community thinks music and band in Murphysboro, they say Crimson Express. You can go outside of Murphysboro and people know Crimson Express. So, there's tradition in and outside of the school, and then that in turn helps lead to recruitment. So, for example, the band this year, I think on the field was over 70 for the first time in a long time. Next year, we're going to be hopefully approaching 80 or a little over. We have started in the beginning band program at Carruthers Elementary, 300 students the last 6 years.
Wow.
And that has transferred up into the middle school. And at the middle school level, our middle school band right now is holding healthy and steady at 75 to 80 kids. I think he's a little over 80 this year, actually. And so we're just now starting to see the fruits of that labor come up to the high school. And so it's a very exciting time here in the history of the band program at Murphysboro.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned Crimson Express, and you and I live about 50 miles apart, and we see each other's programs
Yeah.
quite often.
I can get to you in about 45 minutes, Steve, or an hour. It just depends.
That's about right. Yeah, it depends on
Yeah.
if there's a tractor in the way or something.
Oh, God. I don't want to talk about that. That's another story for another time in terms
That's
of
right.
getting around those tractors at
That's right.
competition.
We have a couple of school bus stories we could get into later too if we want. But Crimson Express. So your
Yeah.
bands are awesome, and I've enjoyed listening to Moreland's bands when he was there, and I love
Yeah.
listening to your bands now that you're there.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
talk a little bit about the marching band. So maybe a little bit with
Yeah.
your BOA experience, and a little bit about
Yeah.
hosting things, and whatever you want to get
Yeah.
into.
So let's start back. How we kind of approach a season, right? So with the marching band, we have kind of kept in the same system the last 36 years. Okay. I mean, at some point, each director has kind of taken their own course of how the programs ran. And I want to get into that a little bit later of how we're able to provide opportunities for kids to do everything at Murphysboro High School and still be part of the band program. But what we do is we firmly believe that, again, concert band is your center of your program. If you have a good concert band, you're going to have a good band program all around. We also believe that in the marching band setting. We start right away in spring training teaching the kids how to play with a good characteristic sound, even in a marching band setting. That includes not blasting, good tone, intonation, technique. And so we go through our show music in the spring, and then our drumline and color guard do mini camps and summer rehearsals through June and July. And then when we come back at the end of July, 1st of August, we're hitting camp to learn all of our drill. And by the end of camp, we hope to have all our drill learned to where we're just cleaning during evening rehearsals and, during the day, during the school day when we have class. So that's kind of like our system that kind of puts the building blocks in place for a successful fall season. And then I know that you understand where I'm coming from on this because I've talked to you about it. We always open up the season with everybody's favorite time of the year, Apple Festival, which is, it is a huge tradition in this town. And I've had the privilege of serving on the Apple Festival Committee as the committee chairman when I was first working in Murphysboro 19 years ago, to now I'm just more of a part of a subcommittee. And we have a wonderful group of parents that have taken this over, to like alumni parents who know how the shows ran. And so I kind of work with them and I organize the show. And then we do a show called Drums at Apple Time. And what I love about that show is that that's a good early season show for bands just to come and perform. You've brought your band there. You guys have done well. But it's a great first performance for groups. So we usually open up the season there. Then we have homecoming, and then we start our competitive season, which the last couple years has been in Southeast Missouri and Southern Illinois. But like you said, we're very lucky that Mike Moreland, when he had the job here for 14 years, he really started to kind of branch out into BOA a little bit more, Bands of America, and we started doing that St. Louis Super Regional. We ended up winning that St. Louis Super Regional in 2010, and then we went to Grand Nationals for the first time in a long time. So the band used to go to Grand Nationals in Indianapolis. They did in 1994 and 1995. And when they went, they did really well. But if you've ever been to a BOA show, it's all about money, and it's the best of the best programs. It's not really all about money. I don't want to say about it. They're a great educational organization. But if we can, the more resources you have, right, the more I think success you're going to see at those type of competitions. But in the end, it's a great experience for your kids. And so, the last couple years, we have continued to go to BOA St. Louis, and then this year we went to Grand Nationals, and out of, I think, 30 bands in the class, we were in the top 12 for a Southern Illinois school with a show with no props, and it was an old school marching band show, and we ended up having our best performance there and our highest score ever at Grand Nationals, and one of our youngest bands. And so I really love BOA. I think they're a great organization. I know you do Music for All concert band contest too, with Melissa up in O'Fallon. And, they do it the right way. They're educational, and yet they provide the competitive aspect. And I think this year they're looking at expanding more on that for these Class 1A groups like us, which is 600 students or less, to maybe doing like a Grand Nationals just for Class 1A bands or a regional for Class 1A bands. So, BOA has been a fantastic experience. Our kids had a blast this year with the performance. We ended up placing really well. And then they were even on a podcast themselves. They got interviewed, and that was cool. We had our seniors do that. So we ended up going undefeated this season, which was fantastic. And then ending it at BOA and doing that well. The marching band continued its tradition. But again, all of this has been put in place over the last 36 years. So it's basically just tradition that builds upon tradition that drives the student to want to do well, basically. So hope that made sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It makes great sense, and
Yeah.
I love that people will be able to get to hear, kind of the history of what you guys have done and
Mhm.
where that has led you guys to go. So it's really cool,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you guys have YouTube videos that of your shows in the past,
We
and
do.
in it, yeah, so people
Yeah.
can find those on YouTube. But that's you take it from me. I've seen your show early in the season, the last couple of years, and
Yeah.
I've loved
Yeah.
it the last 2 years. So that's great.
Well, and the other thing I want to talk about, at Murphysboro, we call it not the MHS band program, we call it the CE bands band program. And so basically what I did is, everybody knows that Crimson name, so I decided when I came to Murphysboro, there's other schools around the area that it has an M as their school name, start of their school name. So I renamed the program the CE Bands program because that's how we're known, and that gives us a little bit of our identity. And we ended up kind of revitalizing the logo towards that, and have a new beautiful sign at our football program. And when we had our 35th anniversary, I came up with the term hard work, tradition, and excellence. And that's what we pride ourselves on, is we work hard, which continues the tradition, which hopefully continues the excellence in all areas: concert, jazz, marching, and pep band. You can have a great pep band too, and you
Sure,
know that because you
sure,
guys are great at pep
yeah,
band as well. So,
yeah.
you know, yeah,
Let's talk about the realities of living in the same town that you work in, which happens to
yeah,
be a small town. What are the challenges that you face, and
yeah.
how do you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so sometimes, this is my second run in Murphysboro, believe it or not. So let's go back to, oh man, and Steve, I always joke, you and I are now like the old guard in Southern
Yeah,
Illinois, down here. Um, 19 years ago, I think that's when I met you for the first time when
yep,
Moreland had the high school program. I was actually at the middle school here in Murphysboro.
yep,
And so I was the assistant director for Crimson. And I did that for 7 years, and we were doing a lot of the same things we're doing now, building up the elementary, building up the middle school program, and then that was starting to feed into the high school. And then I got an opportunity to go to another town in the area, Carterville High School, and I wanted to kind of branch out and do my own things there. And so went there for 5 years, which is a small town. I think my experience in Murphysboro and being from Southern Illinois helped me there, and those people were fantastic. Admin was fantastic. And then I really branched out and went down to, of all places, Orlando, Florida for a
yeah,
year, just to kind of try something different. And I had some good success down there, but family and eventually meeting my wife brought me back up here and got to take over the job that I think they were setting me up for when I first started my career. So the working in a small town like Murphysboro, one thing that's hard is that everybody knows you. Everybody's looking, they know your family. So, it's nice that you can go out to like a grocery store with your wife or out and kids see you, they say hi, or parents see you say hi. Sometimes you've got to just, we always want to stay professional and things. So you have to kind of, be aware of that. I think even a little bit more in your hometown, especially on social media, and not get into some of those issues that, can maybe turn people off to your program, and so I especially these last few years with as things have kind of progressed in the world we live in, right outside of our world, the real world, you kind of learn that your job is just to be there and give the kids the greatest experience you can, and maybe produce your social media and highlight your family and your job and your students, and then just enjoy life a little bit more and enjoy the job. Because if people in your hometown who know you see that you're bothered, they're going to know because they've known you since you were a little
right.
kid. So that's a long answer. I'm sorry. It's just it's
That's
hard to put into
yeah,
words. There are pressures that you have that are great, and the pressure of trying to keep this tradition going on. When I came back 6 years ago, you and I had many conversations. Like, I felt like this pressure to keep the tradition going because Mike Moreland had tremendous success as the director here for 14 years, had a lot of undefeated seasons, and yet I came in right at the start of COVID, right? And so we had to rethink band for like 3 or 4 years and then restart it up. and we kind of got back to where we were pre-COVID this fall. And that's what's great about working in your hometown. You see that success, and you see that people getting around you and getting around your kids and really promoting you and supporting you. And so that's the best of the world. And then I guess the hard part is like what I talked about, when you have some of that pressure, or you want to make sure you're coming, you're under that microscope. So you have to make sure and stay professional mostly at all times when you're out.
Yeah.
And that can be hard sometimes, but they also need to see that you're human too.
Right.
When you're out, and you can have fun and spend time with your family. But, I think it's a hard balance sometimes. So
Yeah, I love that you brought up social media, and I love that you brought up being careful and things like that, because one reason why I've started this podcast is that I'd like for young band directors to watch it, and get some advice from not only older band directors like us, but also, just people that have done it well.
Did you say older band directors like us?
Yeah, I know,
Oh
I
my
know.
goodness, dude.
You're younger than me, so how about older band directors like me?
How old were you when you started up there in Nashville? Like, that was your first job, right?
It was it was my second job. So I taught
Second job, okay. Good deal.
I taught at New Athens for 4 years, and then I came back home. So
How old were you when you started New Athens?
23, I think. I was a little bit older.
I was 23 when I started here, and now I'm like midway through my career, and I'm 41. So it's hard to believe, but yeah. And I'm not saying, I think you'd agree with this. I think when you're younger, you do make mistakes that, you don't realize on social media, if you take a certain position. And man, I still struggled with that into my late 30s. And then I finally realized, I think when you hit 40 and you turn 40, you start to realize, you got to be careful, and what are you there for? You're there to teach the kids, give them a great program. Speak out when things you think are important to speak out, like educational issues, right? Like, I mean, you and I have talked about that. We see injustices in education and towards kids. I think that's absolutely a good thing to talk about on social media, but approach it in a smart way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So you've talked a little bit about this, but let's hit I asked about conflict, or not conflicts, but struggles. How about positives? How about some accomplishments that you guys have had, not only with marching band, but I know you guys just got back home from Disney competition. Maybe talk about that.
It was a lot of travel, a lot of work, and little sleep, but it was worth it. So a lot of bands, and I've done it with my bands in Carterville, and Murphysboro's done it, where they've gone out and marched in the parade down there at the Magic Kingdom. You've done it. I think any band director will take their kids down there just to give them that experience. We went the different route. We went to a place called Festival Disney, which is their competitive concert band and jazz band festivals. And let me state this, and Disney did not pay me to say this, so I'm going to say it's a joke. But they are phenomenal at these competitions. They're fantastic when it comes to setup, provided equipment, professionalism. I brought down equipment that I didn't need because, as you know, we've been to festivals and you're like, they're missing something that's really important. You're like, I should have brought it. But we didn't need that. They provided everything. And there was a lot of bands. And for my jazz band, we killed it. They got the top jazz band award out of everybody. There was another jazz band there, that school like twice our size, and they ended up beating them, which was great. And we got the first place award on that. My concert band finished right in the middle of the pack in their class. Again, early morning. They knew they could have probably performed better. I did too. But, when I saw the recaps back, that was one of the things I thought, man, if we would have just performed like we should have, I think we would have had a great shot. So, there was the positives down there, and the fact of educational component and competitive component. You had good competition, good education, great judges. When you mix all those things together, you have a great experience. And I try to do that at IHSA contests. We have consistently got Division Ones at that contest that you have hosted and now that I host. And then Jazz Band has done some festivals. And then we're getting ready to do our barbecue and jazz for the community with the middle school jazz band and Mike's band there at MMS. So, we have a lot of successes around the entire program now, not just marching, but concert, jazz, pep, and I think I said all them all. I'm a little tired today. I need some more of my
get some more coffee. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got two brothers who are not in music. They
Yeah.
they have different careers, but they always ask me, why in the world would you take 100 kids down to Disney World? I mean, what's the
Yes,
draw? And I always tell them it's because Disney does things right. They treat kids
they
right, and
do.
they know how to treat a performer and how to make them feel
Yeah.
special and all that kind of stuff. So I will never stop taking my kids to Disney World.
No, and not only, I mean, last year and you done this because we talked about this too. You've taken your kids to New York City. That's a
Yeah,
phenomenal experience,
yeah,
and that was fantastic that we did. Now that's a long drive. That is a long drive to New York City from Southern Illinois. I One of the best trips I did was New Orleans. We did a New
yeah.
Orleans trip 2 years ago, 2024. Yeah, and a lot of those kids had never been out of Murphysboro, and then for 3 days they got to go down and saw, the French Quarter. They performed at New Orleans University. They saw a gator tour and a swamp tour, and it was a great experience. And that's another. It doesn't have to be Disney, but you're giving those kids experiences outside of a program. And you talk about a recruiting tool, buddy. That's an
Yeah.
awesome recruiting tool for
Yeah.
programs to travel. You know.
Yeah, we went to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl, and that was, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that was so fun.
You and I
You
talked
know,
about that a lot, and it's New Orleans is one of those. I think people are scared to take their kids there, and rightfully so. I mean, it can be kind of rough in some areas, but this being a big jazzer as well, like that's where the first American music genre started in New Orleans with jazz, and you know why not take your kids down there and show them that history? You can
right?
teach cross curricular all day long on that. So
And they can't go to everything. You would like to
yeah,
take them to Frontman Street and just
oh
go
yeah,
into every bar and
yeah,
let them listen to the music because
hmm
I tell you what, the time my wife and I went down there, we would go to one bar and say that's the best band we've ever heard, and then go to the
yes,
next bar and it was
yeah,
the best band we ever heard. So it just
yeah.
kept happening all day long. So
Yeah, I got a really good friend of mine, one of my best friends. He's actually a Murphysboro alum, Willie Martin, and he was a very successful band director down there in Central Lafourche Parish. He finally gave up that to be a music administrator of the school districts that are in New Orleans, and he just had a baby girl, and he's doing the family thing now. But him and I would always talk about the musicians down there in New Orleans, and a lot of times some of those kids that are in those high schools, that's how they make their money in the summer. They go down and they perform on Royal Street, Jackson Square, and they just play jazz and just
yeah,
enjoy music. And I think we're talking about Southern Illinois. How cool would that be if Southern Illinois had that culture too? I think we
oh my
have
gosh, it'd
it
be
during
great.
the school year and we take our kids out, but and we have, like Carbondale has been known for live local music, and Edwardsville in the St. Louis area. And, you look at the Metro East cities that are growing, like Waterloo, Belleville has always had a great music scene. But there's just something to say about, what New Orleans has done down there. And why not show your kids what all that's about, man?
Right.
Music, art, history, culture. Look at all that, That's
Yeah.
everything they learn in academics right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big proponent in traveling with my kids. You mentioned we've gone to New York, we've gone to Boston.
Yeah.
I took my kids to Washington D.C. last year. I mean, it was there's something about being in those places where you try to make it so special at home, but you
Yeah.
can't do those kinds of things at home. So they see those
So,
things and those things that they may not ever get to see again.
well, and here's the thing too. So I was very lucky coming through the Murphysboro program growing up, and you're at Nashville, so you may have known this being around here. Is that Crimson Express from 1991 through early into the 2000s, we did a summer trip every summer for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
where we would go for 2 weeks, sleep on gym floors, have no cell phones. Right, this is the 90s. Sorry, guys, kids that are not 90s kids that are listening, but you'd call 1-800-COLLECT-HOME, you'd play basketball, you build those relationships, you perform, but then we would go to Boston or Chicago or Mount Rushmore or Denver. I mean, this band I think I have been to, because I've been in band, I have been to 40 of the 50 states.
Yeah,
Isn't
isn't
that
that
amazing?
crazy?
It is
It's
crazy.
awesome.
And I've been to England thanks to Mike Haynes and SIU Carbondale. That's another story
Yeah.
because the wind ensemble went to England my freshman year of college at SIU. And so, that's why I tell kids, the travel is just one positive aspect. And then when you come back to Southern Illinois, you have that outside perspective, right? So I think one reason that my second go around here at Murphysboro has been really successful on a lot of things, and I've kept my perspective as we've gone on this journey post COVID, is I've been outside in the world, and I've seen things out there, and I've dealt with different situations. And then when you come back to a small town, things just, they're at a slower pace, and you kind of give those experiences to your kids too. So
Yeah, you mentioned Mike Haynes. We both
yeah,
shared him
yes,
as I had him as a marching band director and a
yeah,
symphonic band director.
yeah,
What a great advocate he was for
yes,
music education as a whole, not just for small schools but for everybody.
yeah. And he knew Southern Illinois. He
Yeah,
was from Salem, and he came down in the '60s, and he went to SIU as a grad student. Mike Haynes was a big reason why I picked SIU, and I will never forget. He was one of those people that you always remember as one of those teachers, and I have many of them in my career. Mark Nicolay, Mike Haynes, Mary Alice Moss, who was big here in Murphysboro. There's a lot of teachers out there. Dr. Christopher Morehouse at SIU right now, who took over for Mike. He's been there for almost 20. Good Lord, 20 years, 20 more years. He was a great influence. And you just look back at all those teachers. But when I look back at Mike, I think Mike knew Southern Illinois. He knew how to connect to kids at the college level, and get them to enjoy and love band. And so,
yeah,
I miss him. I miss our talks. I would be out when I was at Carterville and I couldn't drive home, and I'd have to go eat dinner because I had a pep band game that night. I would be like the old Steak and Shake in Carbondale. I'd sit down and I hear this, may I join you? And I'd look up and it's Mike Haynes, and we'd sit there and we'd talk just about life and band for about 30 to 40 minutes. And he was always there if you wanted to talk, and that was
yeah.
a good thing about Mike. So
There's a lot of us down here in Southern Illinois that miss Mike. I mean, it's just if you mention Mike's name, it sparks conversation. It
yeah,
sparks feelings of happiness, and just like he
yeah,
was just an amazing person. My wife
yeah.
was a cheerleader at Southern, and she didn't know Mike, but she knew Mike's voice. He would get
Yeah.
on that
That was a
blowhorn
horrible
and
impersonation, by the way. I kind of regret now doing that on this podcast because that's going to go out to Texas or wherever. Mike, if you're listening, I apologize, buddy, on this Easter weekend. But
it wasn't bad. It was
yeah,
your voice isn't quite as rough as Mike's was, so you
no,
can't do it, but
no.
that's okay.
I didn't smoke cigarettes for 30 years.
That's
like Mike
right.
did.
That's right.
We're
I had
starting to
him.
get conversational.
Yeah, I had him as a percussion, teacher too, and that was great, man. We would,
Yeah,
that was back when the the percussion practice room was downstairs in Alt Guild. It was like a
yeah,
dungeon down there. Well, Mike
yeah,
didn't worry about going outside to smoke. He just went
yeah.
up down there.
He told us a story one time where he showed, because, it's college, the marching Salukis. Anybody out there who know the old marching Salukis, right? They were a little rough in terms of personalities. So you might see somebody smoking a cigarette at like a band practice. Mike, I think, told the story of how he taught a kid how to put a cigarette butt out on a marching band field in rehearsal. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, it was a different time back then.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Um, but it's just that type of like human aspect that I think makes you connect as a director. And if any younger directors are out there, we talked about professionalism on social media. I think it's important that kids know you're human too, right? And
Right.
that's one thing that I've grown as from every kid I've taught, and even in every experience I've had in the last 20 years, personal and professional, I've grown from. And kids need to see that human side of you. If you're a high school band director, you can talk, and that was a hard thing for me coming from the middle school world. And I always wanted to be a high school band director. You can talk to them as young adults. You have to talk to them in a way that, try and lead them down the right path. But, they're not going to listen to you if you start like talking to them like they're 5 or 6 years old.
Right.
Have that conversation with them. They're a young adult, but they also need to see that human side of you too, because that's how you connect with them. That's how you build relationships and move forward. So
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
to be human is that's a great way to put it. I mean, just be
Yes.
real and be human, and have your own personality, and
Yeah.
use it.
Well, and you and I were talking before we came on air here on this podcast. Like, I've been dealing with some personal issues for health these last few weeks, and my kids have been concerned, right? And I kind of struggled. I asked my wife, Amanda, I was like, how much do I share? What do I not share? But, it got to the point where they were asking, and so I just kind of would give them updates, and they actually do care, and then
Yeah.
if they know what you're going through, and, you're not going to be there, but you have a reliable person to be there for them, like I have this semester with my student teacher, they're going to be good for them. And they're going to keep the program going while you're kind of taking these little short curves in life,
Yeah.
until you get back to things that are normal. So
I had a very mature senior one year.
Yeah.
I can't remember how early in my career it was, but I didn't share a whole lot with them, and I was really careful and I just didn't I was different. And this kid looked at me and she said, "Mr. Brown, it's okay to let us love you." And everything changed right there. I was like, "Oh yeah, these are kids, and they just sometimes they just need to know you care and be real with them." And so I turned on a dime. That was the change.
I had a great mentor at Carterville as an administrator. His name's Keith Liddell. And Keith hired me there in 2014, and he eventually became the superintendent. And he always said, I don't care what you do, make sure you stay. I mean, he does to a certain point. You got to do your job, right? Like lesson plans and grading, all that. But he goes,
Right.
When it comes to kids, you're doing what's best for kids each day. And those 5 years, on my own there in Carterville, that was a big learning experience for me. I kind of make that as the turning point in my career where I started to make those connections a little bit more and grow as a person and as a director. And if any young educators or student teachers are sitting out there, you gotta show them that you care and you want to do well, but that you're also a good person and wants what's best for them, because that's going to help them buy in even more, to what you're trying to do. So.
Well, Nick, my last question was, what advice would you give younger directors? But I think we already asked that, or already answered that, unless you want to add to it.
Yeah, I mean, I go to Midwest every year, and we talked about social media. So, like 2 years ago, we got Crimson on and the CE band program on Instagram, and before that, I've always been an Instagram guy, and I started following band pages, and I started really following the University of Texas, Austin, the main campus down there, their band program, and Jerry Junkin. And you just see what all they do, right? So Jerry was at Midwest this year with Dr. Tim, who's a BOA, a guy as well, and co-wrote the Essential Elements series for beginning band programs. Dr. Tim's phenomenal. And Jerry Junkin is phenomenal in what he does. And he gave us 3 things, and because there was a lot of student teachers in the room. You had kids that were like first-year directors or student teachers. And, he said, be a good person, do what you're supposed to do, and have compassion and care, And I think that's kind of like summarizing it. But I think those are great things to live by. Know that when you come out of college, most of us are raring to go, right? We have awesome experiences in ensembles. I had a fantastic student teaching experience in Belleville District 118 and at Belleville East High School. 2 of the best up there that I learned from, Mark Tessero and Tony DiPasquale. I mean, I was fired up and raring to go, but then you get your own program, right? And you have to decide how you want your program to be. And I think, if you go on the band director's Facebook page, you start seeing directors comment like, I'm starting to get burned out and I'm having these discipline issues. And I mean, I've been seeing that a lot lately. And I just want to tell them, make some minor adjustments how you're approaching the job, like take put the ego aside a little bit, and I mean that with everybody, right? Because we all want to come in and have the best of the best, right? But we all have to be down in the trenches and learn the job. And honestly, I feel like you don't really learn it takes years to fine tune the craft. It is a craft. And Jim Childers at Marion, who's retired now, told me this. You learn something different every year, and you fine tune your craft, and know that if you go as hard as you want to when you start teaching, you're gonna hit that burnout point at least a few times, and you won't know how to handle it. But if you take it one step at a time and continue to learn, then I think you'll have a wonderful career and enjoy band directing and enjoy whatever school you're at, because you're teaching in terms of music, band, choir. And that's what you want. You want a career that lasts over 30 years, not a career that lasts like 2 years and then you're done,
Right. And
I think sometimes college professors, that they have so much to teach to you in the 4 years that you're doing the music ed degree, or some years 5, but what if we had a class on, okay, what is it like to be a band director, like the first 5 years? I think that would be amazing,
Yeah,
and
that would be great.
I think that would be a great clinic at Midwest or IMEC.
Yes.
And Steve, maybe we should.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. You and I need to go do that.
And I mean, I'm talking, no matter what university you come from, you're going to have struggles, and you got to figure out how to handle those struggles, how to grow from them. And it does take, at some point, putting that, I don't want to say ego in a bad way, but just put that down. Like,
Right.
I'm awesome, great, but these kids need to learn something, okay? And so they're not there to see how awesome I am. They're there to learn and, teach them. And teach them to love band, teach them to love music, and give them the experiences. And I think you'll grow as an educator, a band director, and they'll grow as students. And at the end of your career, if that happens, then I think you've had a successful one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nick, this has been awesome, man. I wish we could do this for another hour.
Hour.
I know. You and I both could.
I hope I didn't say anything like everybody comes out of college, like, I'm raring to go. I want them to see how awesome I am in terms of what I've learned, right? But at the same time, the kids, they're coming up to learn music. You have to put that aside. Teach them how to love music, teach them how to love band, teach them how to be a good person, and then at the end, your career will be very successful over the 30 years. It doesn't matter how many Division I plaques, how many Grand Champion trophies you get, or how many superiors or excellent ratings. What does your career look like at the end of year 35, 36, And so that's where I'm at in the midpoint of my career, and I want to continue this job. I have like we talked about, I have my principal's degree. I don't want to be an admin. I have stuff I still want to accomplish, and I want to be a band director. This is what I love. I've been doing it for almost now going to be 20 years next year. So
yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on. This has been great. I can't wait to actually get this podcast up and let people hear it. So,
for sure.
Anyway, thanks to our listeners. Thank you to tuning in to Small Town Sound. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with other music educators who are making a difference in small schools. And remember, big impact doesn't require a big school. It requires just some heartfelt teaching to kids that want to learn music.